So it's 3 days before Gimmel Tammuz, and so let's Farbrengen a little bit, talk a little bit about our dear Rebbe. It's his 28th yard site. So as much as we want and demand Mashiach, not just sitting back on our loins, for him to show up and inspire us. But when there's something that's good, you have to go out of your way to demand it. That's what the Rebbe said when he initiated his We Want Mashiach kind of campaign in the 80s. So he said that Yidden are asking for Mashiach for thousands of years, 1900 years. Ani Mamin be'emunah shleima be'vias HaMashiach. So what's the chiddush? What's the novelty here? And what we understood after he explained the whole idea is that it's not enough to Ani Mamin be'vias HaMashiach, I believe, and Achak Eloi. Achak Eloi means I wait for him to come. The Rebbe said, no longer is waiting good enough. Now we have to demand and push forward and do activities that are oriented specifically for Mashiach. And if someone wants to really honor the Rebbe's neshama and wants to know what he was driven towards for the 42 years that he was the 7th Lubavitcher Rebbe, and after continues to be the Lubavitcher Rebbe from on high, it's Mashiach. There's not even a question. And yes, he taught so much Torah, Nigla, Chassidus, and everything, and he sent out shluchim and to help Jews, and even lahavdil non-Jews. In 1983, I believe he started the Sheva Mitzvah Bnei Noach campaign. It's all true, but what does it all consist of? One goal, one mission. Mashiach should come, and that's why in 1991 the Rebbe said that Sikha, which took us for a ride and really surprised us, and more so, it was very painful. Those that were, serious about it, it was very painful when the Rebbe said, "I've done whatever I can, and now it's up to you." Now you could take to bring Mashiach. Now you could take that statement, and he said even more so, which Hasidim generally don't repeat because it's too painful. That he said, whatever I've done till now is leheva v'lorik. It's for naught. He said those words. So, when you think about it, what do you mean? You've been sending out rabbis and shluchim worldwide. You've been teaching Torah for 40 years. Your congregation, your Hasidic movement has grown from a post-Holocaust, few to so many, etc., etc. So what do you mean everything you've done is for naught? That's a question that a serious Lubavitcher, or anyone, if he has respect for the Lubavitcher Rebbe and he wants to understand what he meant. And it's very simple, very simple. You don't need any, Kabbalistic insight. He's saying, compared my mission, this is the way I see it. My mission is to bring Mashiach. My mission for Klal Yisrael is Mashiach should come b'poel mamish. Everything else is secondary, is ancillary. So even though I've done all these good things, it hasn't brought Mashiach. So in the greater picture, what is it worth? Now, of course, we mean a mitzvah is eternal, a mitzvah is valuable. He doesn't mean to discount that. And you get your schar, but bottom line, where's Mr. Mashiach? It didn't happen. And that was a very, very painful thing, but the words that he began that part of that talk were very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very therapeutic. And they were, the Rebbe said, I did whatever I can, and now it's up to you. That was empowering the Jew, empowering the chassid. So here again, you'll say, wait a minute, then what? 10 years before that, when he suggested putting on tefillin with Yidden and putting up mezuzahs and then giving tzedakah and all those mitzvah campaigns that the Rebbe initiated in the 1970s, were not empowering the individual. Yes, they were, but the emphasis then wasn't on Mashiach. The emphasis now in this kind of last will and statement that he made, he empowered the individual. And he's saying what it says in the Torah. And here we go back to a very important point, that it's Gimmel Tammuz, and it's very important to understand this and emphasize it. Whether it's the Baal Shem Tov, whether it's Nachum Chernobyl, whether it's Rebbe Yemelech Mlazinsk, they didn't, or whether it's the Lubavitcher Rebbe, they didn't come to create a new Torah. That's heresy, and it's against the Torah. They came to reveal within the Torah the depth of Torah, the mission of Torah for the particular generation. So the Rebbe at this point in his life in 1991, and it's so interesting that just less than a year later, he had this debilitating stroke, which ultimately led to his passing in 1994. He made that statement. It's if you look at the historical facts, it's blatant. It's blatant that a tzaddik talks, and in a way like he doesn't, he talks, and there's so much there. If you look back, that's the script was written. And the script was that, shortly my soul is returning to Hashem. And therefore, I'm empowering you people. And he said, get together. He said, 1, 2, 3 to a minyan. And bring Mashiach. Those were the words. And he said it, by the way, with a lot of emotion and very emphatic. So it had the flavor, it had the taste, it had the makeup of what could be perceived as someone who's desperate. And guess what? There's positive desperation, holy desperation, and there's negative desperation. And this was positive, holy desperation. We need Mashiach. So I did whatever I can. It hasn't happened yet. You guys do it. Maybe you'll succeed in doing it. So when we come to this day, Gimmel Tammuz, and this year it's this Shabbos, you also need to know something very important. And the Alter Rebbe says this in the Igeres HaKodesh, from the Zohar HaKodesh. Tzaddik dispater, a tzaddik who passes on, is found yatir, he's found more here than he was mibechayohi, from when he was alive. That has nothing to do with Chassidus, Baal Shem Tov, that's Zohar HaKodesh. The Alter Rebbe in the Igeres HaKodesh explains in Siman Chav Zayin, and Siman Chav Zayin explains this piece of Zohar at length. And he explains that since the content of a tzaddik is emunah, ava, and yirah, faith in God, love and awe for Hashem, therefore, when are those things more palpable and less inhibiting? After the physical body passes on and not before. Before Yoni, there is a wife and there are Hasidim and there's constrictions and conformities, as we discussed yesterday, as Israel brought to the table. But after a person passes on, all of that is gone. So now, those that are left and those that believe and want to continue this reality, I'm not going to use the word legacy, but this mission, have an open door. And the proof is that since 1994, 28 years ago, the amount of Chabad houses, dissemination of Torah and Hasidus, and everything else is ad infinitum compared to what it was before, and that's in the bank. That's not, me saying this here as a wannabe. That's take a look at everything that's been done in 28 years. It's really, and I come from the generation of the 70s and the 80s, okay? So I saw with my own eyes, and I was part of that budding Chabad movement in the 70s that exploded in the 90s. Lahavdil, like the .com age. It just took off. How did it take off? So the Zohar says, Avram, it took off because the limitations put on the tzaddik who was behind this particular movement and this particular approach, he's no longer in the physical world, so he's able to give all of himself and all of what he represented to the world and those that want to fulfill that particular mission. And this is true for every tzaddik. This is not just for the Rebbe, this is true for every tzaddik. But in this case, it's clear. And it's clear that the mission was to bring Mashiach. And I point out to you something else historically. Overall, the Baal Shem Tov, we're learning now, Kuntas in Orthodox Hasidus, about the Baal Shem Tov's Chiddush. The Baal Shem Tov, Hasidism, was the movement and the teaching of bringing Mashiach. And this is what alarmed the academic world and frankly the Ashkenazic Litvish world in the past. The attitude was like, whether you were Ashkenaz German Jew, was like, let God worry about those things and just don't touch that. The academics, going back even to the Mendelssohns and the Haskalah people, they too said, just leave that alone. Then when Zionism came along, and they came up with the idea of Geula and Eschalta de Geula, that's where non-religious people and religious people also started to identify with the Mashiach concept, but of course through a Zionistic lens and a lens of Herzl and even those that were religious, Rav Kook and all that. It was a different type of lens but the lens did talk about Geula. The Baal Shem Tov spoke about Geula, and his whole mission about Geula was through Hasidism, and this was something innovation. So therefore, an innovation, at least outwardly, was an innovation. So it alarmed people, and there was fallback and upset people and etc. And to the point where Gershon Sholem, for example, who studies the Baal Shem Tov, concocts a whole new Baal Shem Tov, which, as we say in Yiddish, is nicht gesteigen and nicht geflogen. You ever heard that expression? Gesteigen and geflogen means it's fairy tales. It's nonsense, totally nonsense. But he
can you say more about what you mean by that? What he concocted?
Sholem, first of all, argues that there was no real Baal Shem Tov, and the message was a message of hope, but there was no real Baal Shem Tov, and if there was an individual who lived and was called that way, he was nothing special, and he was turned into a miracle maker. That's the message of Sholem and company. He wasn't the only one, and till today there is that school of thought.
Buber in that.
Martin Buber, right? Martin Buber was even more extreme. Sholem was a little more to the center, a little more. But Buber, I meant actually Buber. Thank you for saying that. Martin Buber. It's interesting, you mentioned just for a moment, the Rebbe, someone had cited Buber in a footnote, and the Rebbe checked, he asked the Rebbe to check his work, and the Rebbe crossed out the reference to Buber, because Buber denies the authenticity of the Baal Shem Tov. But that school of thought still exists, my friends. If you think it doesn't, it does. It's waned, it's much less, because we do have today religious professors like Professor Schwartz at Bar Ilan. These are from professors of Benjamin Brown, my good colleague at Yerushalayim Hebrew University. I mean, these are massive, scholars in their work, and they're from, then maybe not Hasidic, but and they believe that there was a Baal Shem Tov, and the Hasidic movement has a value. But going back to the point I'm making is that the Baal Shem Tov came to introduce Mashiach via Hasidism. So the academics today, when they talk about in other words, whether it be the academics who deny Baal Shem Tov or the academics in a sense who do agree, they pinpoint that Hasidism came to give the Jewish people hope of salvation via Mashiach. Now, every lie has some truth to it, right? There's truth to that. There's absolutely truth to that. But the question is, in what is the way you spin it? That's the question. So if you spin it that this is a fable and a Baba Maisa, and it's giving false hope, therefore, then, stay away from that. And this was the taina of the Misnagdim going back 200 years ago. Don't think, I wanted to say for the record in a way, don't think that the Misnagdim of 200 years ago didn't have a position, didn't have an argument. They did. Their argument was, this is going to lead, God forbid, to devastation where Jews will be again disappointed. Because the Hasidic movement has convinced Jews that the Mashiach is a reality and we have to do things to bring Mashiach, i.e. learn Hasidus, and he doesn't come, so again we're back to false messiahs. What did the Rebbe dealt with this question, by the way, indirectly, and he said many times that the accusation, the fear, we understand. But now, look at the result. 200 years later, no one who's Hasidic, has dropped their Judaism because Mashiach is not here. We're talking about no one. We're talking about basically most people. So in other words, your concern is that this will lead to devastation, depression, giving up hope. It didn't happen. On the contrary, look at Hasidic Jews, how involved they are in Torah. So that was the Rebbe's counter all the years to the Litvische movement. That I understand the concern 200 years ago of the Vilna Gaon, etc., and his people. But now, in the last 100 years, Poland was full of Gerard and Alexander Hasidim. Hungary was full of Hungarian, and then American Eretz Yisrael. Okay, the fear is over. Yes, Moshe. Moshe, I need the water.
Yeah, Rabbi Delvin, forgive. I know this is for Farbrengen, but I want to ask a question on what you're saying.
Sure.
We have here. We've seen now within the last. This is my opinion, but I think we've seen within the last 10, 15 years an emergence of fringe sects, which
we've seen what? 15 years of what? Last 15
sex.
The emergence of fringe sects, like groups, like cults almost. I would say I would put them in the category of cults.
Cults? You mean like the left Tahar?
Yeah, that's a perfect example.
Okay.
One of the,
Okay.
we have here, I would say in Ramat Bet Shemesh Bet, there exists what I would put to be people who are probably aligned with Lev Tahor.
Thank you.
You have Turi Karta, which I'll put into Turi Karta in it's different, but the point or my question is that how do we I mean, and by the way, all these groups, I don't even know if any of these groups, I don't know if any of these groups could really claim that they're tied to the Baal Shem Tov. But I would say that some of them, particularly in Bet, among certain individuals, there seems, I would say, let's say in Breslov, there can be people who would associate with Breslov. Some there are also some Breslov on the real fringe, like that I would put as like almost like in a cult category. So what I'm asking is, I think we do have today individuals, even groups, that are on the fringe, and I think that they've caused a lot of problems.
Okay.
And
I got it. I understand what you're asking, and the answer is that you always will have. I mean, I can use a word which I shouldn't use, but you always have. You use the word cults. Some people use the word mushugoyim. What does the word meshuga mean? Meshuga means people who are obsessed and convinced that this is the way to do it. And we have that in Chabad, as you know, and I don't want to really go into that, but Chabad has its share of those, people like that. And this Breslov, any extreme was not tolerated by the Baal Shem. I should say, was not what the Baal Shem Tov and his Talmidim until today want. That's it. And if a person feels that their particular Rebbe and Hasidim and group is going in that direction, they have a right to reassess and make a decision if they want to continue. But the decision has to be from the soul, not from the cup. You see? From the head, if you make a decision, it's not necessarily legitimate. It could be, but it could be also not. The question is the soul. Now, what do I mean? This ties in actually with the Baal Shem Tov and a Rebbe, Bechlal. The whole idea of a Rebbe versus a Rav and a Gadol, right? What's the difference? Like, we're celebrating the Rebbe's yard site. We're talking about the learning of the Baal Shem Tov and the Kunteris, right? And they're Gdolim, they're Rabbanim. What did you come along here? The answer is, and I've told you this before, and I repeat it, the answer is that a Rebbe is a soul geologist. No one's going to say, and I actually took data and questioned people who were Talmidim of great Rabbanim and Rosh Hashivas. And I asked them clearly, I'll give you an example. I spoke to someone who was very close to Rabbi Hutner like a child, and he got engaged, and I asked him, did you ask for Rabbi Hutner's blessing to the point that if he would have not blessed you, you would have not got married? And he said, absolutely not. Not even a question. That's the answer. That's the answer. A chassid, if he doesn't get his Rebbe's bracha, a real chassid of any Rebbe, he's not married. And if he does, he's sorry to say, he's not a real chassid. He likes his Rebbe, he gets inspired, but he's not yet a real chassid. And that Moshe makes the difference. So if you're a real chassid, you don't do things that fits your fancy, or you decide this is the way to do it. That's the absolute opposite of Baal Shem Tov. So do we have those fringe elements and groups today? Yes. And you see the result of a Lev Tar. I mentioned that because it's all over, you know? I mean, do you need it, you know? So when you go and do things on your own, and even if it's a group, it's fraught with problems. But the tendency is human nature. That's the way human nature is. I want to go back to the Farbrengen because time is short. So, the Rebbe's mission of bringing Mashiach was very unique amongst Jews, Rebbes, and even to his predecessors. No one before him in Chabad put such an emphasis on doing whatever you're doing is to bring Mashiach a step closer. And I can tell you that he succeeded in this. Because, again, I'm not bragging, but I lived in the 70s. I lived when it was kind of pre-Mashiach fever. So I lived before, and I lived in, and I lived after. And there's no question that whatever your involvement with Mashiach is, by the person who is kind of the least Mashiachistic, you know what I'm saying? Still, there's something burning inside that individual, a Lubavitcher Chassid. What am I doing today to bring Mashiach? And that's what he wanted. That's what the Rebbe wanted. He wanted every year to ask himself that question. And that's what he meant with tut altzvos irken. Do whatever what it is to feel there's something missing. And this message is alive now as it was 28 years ago. Now, naturally, one of the arguments is, how has Chabad blossomed so much for the last 28 years without a living Rebbe? Well, there's a Balabatisha answer to that, which I'm sure you've thought about. When you don't have someone sitting on the throne, you know, and directing yes and no, everyone makes their own decisions in a way, you know. And that Mashiach feeds into what you're saying. That's how groups create their own decisions, because there's a breakdown in leadership. And the Rebbe was such a leader that everyone, like, it was, in a way, there was no independence. Although he gave so much independence, but everyone kicked it back to him. So what happened after he passes away 28 years ago, it's like, we're lost. But then the Lubavitchers say, wait a second, we're not lost, because he said we should do whatever it is. So whatever it is, that means I have to do it. The problem you run in with that is you need leaders. We spoke about conformity. Someone sent me a YouTube, who watched the YouTube of yesterday, Isser, and it was a woman who I know, and she's like a little, she's not officially a Lubavitcher, but she learns Lubavitcher Chassidus, Chabad Chassidus, and she's really a firebrand and a serious one. And she said, you know, there is a good thing to conformity to your Rav, conformity to your Rebbe. And if that's your conformity, that's Gewaldig. And that's the point, Moshe. That's the point. When groups go into their own fantasies, and they don't check with what the literature world calls Das Torah, what the Hasidic world calls, you know, a Rebbe, what the Rebbe suggests that Yedidim and Vinim and things like that, then people go off in their own tangents. But going back to Gimmel Tammuz, it's a day, this Shabbos, that minimize your sleep, minimize your non-idle conversation. It's really full of holy energy, and we all have personal needs, community needs, family needs. This is a Zman of Tefillah, because the Tzaddik's neshama comes into the world on the day of the Yortzeit. This Shabbos is Gimmel Tammuz. Like I said yesterday, you know, try to get an aliyah, light a licht, a candle before Shabbos, you know, try to learn a mimer, a part of a mimer from the Rebbe, Sirach Hasidic Farbrengen, That means, yes, maybe you have to schlep a little bit in the heat, and I'm talking about myself too. I'm going to be leading a Farbrengen in Boca Raton, and it's going to be 90 degrees already. So that means 90 to 95. So it's going to be a sweltering heat. But that's it. That's it. You got to do it. If you don't do it this Shabbos, and the treasure is open, whatever, it's an opportunity.
All right, so Moshe, we're on. Moshe was just saying he's doing a kiddush in
exactly.
What do you call it? So we're on.
Absolutely, I am convinced that a lot of people will say l'chaim, and there are a lot of people that maybe they're not Lubavitch today, but they were touched by Chabad, and so it's a great opportunity. And whether it's Moshe, Yoni, or Issa, whoever, Hillel, whoever, everybody, leave people with something practical. Not just, okay, l'chaim, and then suggest something concrete, Hayom Yom, such a simple thing. If I'm giving an example, if people can just read online, or in the Chayenu, or through the Sefer, the Hayom Yom, it's short, and the Rebbe was the one who compiled it. It's not his Chedushim. It's from the previous Rebbe's talks and letters, but it's something that he put out in 1943. That's a very practical thing, and I think it'll go a very long way for many people in their Avodas Hashem. The Farbrengen is not made to make another Lubavitcher. There is such a Farbrengen, and that's a different type of Farbrengen. But, this idea, you know what I'm saying? This is a tzaddik who mamish put his life, and you think about it, the Rebbe was born in 1902. He lived through 1905, the Russian-Japanese War. He lived through World War I. He lived through World War II. He lived through, Vietnam. He lived through Pearl Harbor. I mean, he wasn't there, but he mamish passed away, right, in 1994. That's almost 100 years. That's a generation. That's a century. It's a person, and he wasn't the only one. Soloveitchik also lived, and others. But he somehow, because of who he was and the style that he used, he had a connection with all kinds of people way beyond most other Rebbes and most other Rabbanim. That wasn't their cup of tea. That wasn't their interest. So let's say the Moat says Gedolei HaTorah. Amongst themselves and all their people, they were very powerful and got together, you know what I'm saying? But that was a limited group. The RCA and the Mizrahi movement had their group, you know what I'm saying? With the Rebbe, you see, in 1960-61, a whole group of RCA rabbis come to see him and ask him if he can help them. They're going to go to Russia, Soviet Union at the time, USSR, and can him coming from Russia, can he help them? And this is Nachum from JM and the AM, his father.
Siegel.
Nachum Siegel's father was Rabbi Siegel, and he was a big machar.
Yeah.
What?
He's going to play it. He has an interview every year. He plays it. He's going to play it, I think, tomorrow. It's the interview that he interviews. I think it was an interview with his father about the Rebbe. He does it every year.
Right. So I'm just giving. He's one. Then a few weeks ago, I heard a Rabbi Baruch Bernard Pupka, who was an Orthodox rabbi in Pittsburgh, came from Russia. You have a clip online. You have to listen to it. He speaks in eloquent English. It's with an accent a little bit, and he speaks about what he saw in Russia, and he talks about the Rebbe. It blew me away. He's coming from a Litvischer background, and he says, "You people don't know who the Lubavitcher Rebbe is," and he doesn't divulge because they had private conversations about what he says. But I could tell you, there's no one in the world that knows what's going on in Russia. It's 1961 or so, better than this Rebbe sitting in Brooklyn, New York. So, the Satmarov didn't have that. Rabbi Aaron Kotler didn't have that. They just weren't. That wasn't their world. This Lubavitcher Rebbe, this was his world, and because this was his world, it was a great way of bringing Yiddishkeit to all, not just to non-religious people. That's another mistake people make. That the Rebbe, just like I told you yesterday, the mistake is with the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov came to address the ignorant. It's wrong. Baal Shem Tov came to address the Talmud Chacham learning in Ponevezh as much as the guy on the street with the ponytail. There's no difference. The message here was one way, and the message here was another. Same with this Rebbe, with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, with the Rebbe. The same idea. His message was the same in different ways to different groups. So these are some things that you could think about over Shabbos, and to make a achlot, as I said, say l'chayim, to give some tzedakah before to one of the Rebbe's institutions. You know, it's important to do that, to give tzedakah. Tzedakah is poida the nefesh, a pidyon. And those that want, I'll be at the oil tomorrow morning. I won't be there Gimmel Tammuz. If you know someone that's going to be the Gimmel Tammuz, give him your name and names for requests, or send it into the oil. They have a, what?
Are we meeting tomorrow?
Right now, I don't see that it's possible because I have to go on a plane. But if I'm able to, like last time, teach from the airport lounge over there, I'll do that. So, but I don't see it. So the answer now is no. And if there's a change, I'll let you know. And those that can join, that'd be great. I would like to, but it's tight because my daughter's going to camp and whatever. And it's the airlines now. The delays are gefährlich. And it's July 4th weekend this weekend, so I got to get out early because I got this Shabbaton that I have to lead. So if I don't make it there, I'm in trouble. So I'm starting.
Rabbi, when are you coming back to New York?
I don't know. We'll see how long I can tolerate the 90 degrees, and I'm gonna do swimming. Got to keep this goof in shape. My son has a pool, so we'll see. Could be 3. Could be till if I could manage. I'd like to come back erev. 9 days, I would like if I could tolerate it, but we'll see, Anyway, Rebbe should help the neshama of the Rebbe. We don't say his name. Ben Chana should have an aliyah, and we should all be part of that, and we should inspire ourselves, our children, grandchildren, and family and friends, and everyone else. And Taka, we should merit that Mashiach should come, the Poel Mamish, not a fantasy world with the antennas going up like in Mars, but right here on Earth. So everything is good.
Amen.
Yes. Amen.
Amen.
Everything is good and nice, but we need Mashiach now, the Poel Mamish. Yeah. Amen. Take care. Zayt Monday, I'll see everyone. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So yeah, my husband.